If you are using Unreal Engine 5, you may have noticed that lumen reflections, when using Lumen software ray tracing, flicker like crazy on translucent surfaces like water and glass. This is an issue that many people have complained about. If you look on the Unreal Engine forums, if you look on Discord servers, even Unreal Engine marketplace assets for water shaders that previously worked in Unreal Engine 4 are flickering like crazy with Lumen in Unreal Engine 5, and this issue is persistent at least until Unreal Engine 5.3.2 and I believe 5.4.1 as well. And you can see lots of examples of shaders on the marketplace being review bombed with negative reviews saying things like water flickers uncontrollably in Unreal Engine 5.3, and oftentimes creators not really knowing how to fix this issue. Unfortunately, this is not a problem with the shaders themselves, and that would lend themselves to easily being fixed by people who are making them, but does appear to be, I think, an issue with the way that Lumen Radiance Cache is being applied to translucent reflections. If you look at the Lumen technical talk that was given at SIGGRAPH in 2022, you can find the document for this online. This is a 200-page slide deck of information about Lumen, but if we go all the way down to page 188, we can find some information about the Lumen Radiance Cache as it is being applied to translucency reflections and some of the challenges associated with this. This, by the way, is a great resource if you want to understand the things that are happening in Lumen whenever you run into issues. So as far as I can tell, this does appear to be an issue with the Lumen Radiance Cache being applied to translucent reflective surfaces, giving this flickering effect. And although I'm not a technical artist or rendering engineer, I have had success in getting rid of this flickering effect by simply turning off the Radiance Cache for translucency reflections with Lumen when you are using software ray tracing. Now you can visualize the effects of the Lumen Radiance Cache here. There are a couple of console commands that can help you do this. One is r.lumen.radiancecache.visualize. Set that to 1. And you can see these are the probes that are being applied here. And you can, if you go to the Lumen documentation, there are a lot of different console variables that can be used to control the things like the resolution and number of probes and how often they're updated. For example, if I just go here and I set r.lumen screen probe gather radiance cache probe resolution, what this is going to do is control the number of traces per radiance cache probe. On high settings, it's set to 16 by default, and cinematic is 32. You'll notice if I change this to 32, it does have an effect, but it doesn't get rid of the flickering problem, and that's because over large distances, we can still see these traces being updated. The other thing we can do is we can also change the update budget. So r.lumen.screenprobegather.radiancecache number of probes, num probes to trace budget. This by default, again, is at 300 on high and epic settings and at 1000 on cinematic. If I turn it all the way up to cinematic, you'll notice that the traces are updated much more rapidly. But again, it doesn't really resolve the issue because even though they're being updated more quickly, we can still see the flickering when we're looking across water surfaces over a long distance. So you can see none of these things are really affecting the flickering too much. They are having an effect, but we're still able to see the flickering issues. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that turning up some of these settings is not free and comes at some cost in terms of performance. So changing some of these Lumen screen probe gather settings can have an effect on your GPU time. Now, if you're using hardware ray tracing, this tends to be less of an issue. It tends to look a lot better. But if you're making games, particularly, you want your game to run well and look well on lower spec hardware because you want it to be accessible to as many people as possible. And this flickering is just totally unacceptable. And many people are not going to be able to run hardware ray tracing. And so when you have software ray tracing enabled, how can we fix this issue? So I'm here inside the engine in a pretty complex project with a river water shader, and you can see the flickering here is pretty bad. What I've had the most success with is to just turn off radiance cache for translucent surfaces with Lumen altogether. And the way that we can do that is with the console command r.lumen.translucency reflections .radiance cache, and we're going to set that to 0. And you'll see two things. First of all, the flickering is gone right away. So you can see already our water looks a lot better. There are no flickering problems whatsoever. The second thing you'll notice is it does change the appearance of your water. So your water, or if it's glass or whatever other translucent reflective surface you're working with, will look a bit different because we are now excluding the radiance cache from it entirely. That could be something you like, could be something you don't like. Really, it depends on your project and your own tastes. For my use cases, I think it looks great. I think it looks a lot better than having reflective surfaces that flicker like crazy, even if the shading overall is sort of a little bit worse in terms of sort of where dark and light shaded areas are applied. I think the flickering is just unacceptable. And I've tested this under sort of a variety of different lighting conditions, and you can see that it really looks pretty good. So this is a river water shader that's using screen space reflections. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty real. I don't see a big issue with this, and I would include this in a game. And again, the flickering is completely gone. I've tested this with other water shaders as well. You can see here, this is an ocean shader I made with Gerstner waves. Again, no flickering. The flickering is completely gone, and it's looking pretty good. Now, if you want to include this fix permanently into your project, you can do that. However, one of the things I've noticed is you can't just drop this console variable into the default engine INI like you might be able to with other console commands. For one reason or another, that doesn't seem to work. And so there is a simple way to fix this, which is that you can just execute it inside of Blueprint. So if you have your level blueprint inside of your persistent level, or if you have your game instance or game state, anything that is going to run very early on as soon as you open your game and start playing, what you can do is you can off of begin play, we're going to search for execute console command, and this is going to allow you to run a console command variable from inside of this blueprint. And in here we will just paste our console command r.lumen.translucency reflections.radiance cache 0. And so now if I just, as an example here, let's turn the radiance cache back on. So we have all this flickering. What will happen is that as soon as we start play, it's going to execute that console command, and it's going to turn off the surface radiance cache. So as far as the player is concerned, they're never going to see that issue. And so that's one workaround that you can use in order to make sort of a more permanent fix for this problem. Now, there is one other thing that you can do if you do not want to disable the radiance cache, and what you can do here is you can alter one of the console variables that we looked at already, which is the speed at which the probes are being updated. And so we have screen probe gather, radiance cache, number of probes to trace budget, typically set at 300, and what that means is that 300 of these are being updated per frame. Now, what you could do is significantly reduce that number. We can turn it down to something like 15. You'll notice it hasn't significantly changed the look of our water, and the flickering issue is again gone. And the flickering isn't actually gone. What's happening here is that we've just significantly reduced the update speed of these probes. But one of the things you should keep in mind here is that this is affecting the Lumen Screen Probe Gather overall, unlike the console variable for radiance cache, which we had turned off only for translucent reflections. And so this could be something that could have other negative effects potentially elsewhere in your game where lumen is being used. And again, it depends on the context of your scene, but really the big issue is here is that the lighting is going to update very slowly, because again, we've turned down the speed at which those probes are being updated. And so if you have a scene where you have rapid transitions in lighting, this probably isn't an appropriate method for you, because what's going to happen is that the lighting is not going to update quickly, and that's going to cause some weird shading effects. And so I'll show you an example of what that looks like, but really this is probably only appropriate if you have a scene where you have consistent lighting in your level that you know is not going to change, as opposed to scenes where you may have lights that can move, or for example a source of light like the sun that could go down, where you could have a rapid transition from bright to dark, or vice versa. Let's see, I'm going to set it to something like 25, and you'll notice that if we have a sudden change in light in our scene, so let's say we go from something very bright to something very dark, it is taking a long time to update, and that's because we are updating so few of these probes per frame that the lighting in our scene isn't able to sort of smoothly update. And so this is sort of creating a separate issue if we try to resolve the problem this way. In any case, I know that's an issue a lot of people have been struggling with for a long time, and so hopefully this is helpful for you.